The Particular Abilities of Marinette and Her Discovery of Them by Plantserfun06. Chapter 14. Hellfire. Bunnox had been so kind as to dump them all in an unfamiliar place with a simple, "Alright, this is a really bad Akuma. You have limited information. All you need to know is all else has failed. Good luck." And before anyone could ask what the actual hell was going on, Bunnox jumped back into her burrow and closed the portal. When Ladybug finally grounded herself and got over the shock, she looked around and realized she couldn't see much of anything. Below her feet she could feel concrete, the smooth kind, the kind that would be poured for sidewalks or for buildings. The air was incredibly dry and hot. Wherever Bunnox had dropped them off, it had to be in the dead of summer, and considering how the heat felt like it was directly on them, they were probably outside, maybe on a building roof somewhere in the city. But getting a clear picture of where she was and what was going on was not happening on her own. It was often that Ladybug was too far away from the scene, or the scene was near completely invisible to her, when she would need to have assistance in the matter. After nearly 2 years of Chat Noir knowing of her blindness and them both concealing it from everyone else, they had become quite good at her discreetly asking questions and him discreetly answering them. It was Rena who answered her. "Burning. It's all burning." Her heart nearly skipped a beat. What the hell did she mean? She looked over at Chat Noir, standing beside her. She wished she hadn't trained herself to recognize what his facial expressions meant, learned to recognize what the smallest shifts meant, when she would have gone her whole life without seeing the pure, unadulterated terror painted across her closest partner's face. He must have seen her confusion, must have recognized that she was clueless as to what was going on. She heard him utter in a voice so hoarse she could barely recognize it was her partner at all. "It's Paris. Paris is burning." They had been walking around the streets for nearly 2 hours now, since their preferred method of rooftop running to get around the city was impossible, with nearly every building doused in flames. While everyone else had done a good job of negotiating the flames and avoiding burns, that was not the case for everyone. So far, she had burned her hands and singed her ponytail, and she had gotten second-degree burns on her legs, through her suit, before she healed it to a first degree, and kept on walking. It was incredibly hard for her to navigate, no matter the fact that Paris had many buildings made of wood, or at least wood interior, and there was a bunch of plant life. Not even counting the sheer amount of people that lived here, Ladybug couldn't see it, while Marinette was able to see anything biotic, even if it was dead. If the matter had gone through a chemical change, she would not be able to see it, and currently, everything was burning. She would occasionally come across some fragments of bodies that had not been burned entirely. She had come across bits of plant life she could still see, but it was all dead. Though nothing could have prepared her for the feeling of stepping on a body. She couldn't see it, but her suit was basically another layer of skin. While it protected her from hits and pain, it allowed her to feel the finer things. She could feel her foot suddenly drop a couple of inches, accompanied by the sound of brittle breaking. God, she didn't want to think about it. It was different from the catacombs. In the catacombs, she could see where they were, and expect it. And those bones could be hundreds of years old. And if they weren't, then they had what was coming for them for deciding to explore Parisian catacombs when it was incredibly illegal, and everyone knew not to do it, or you would likely get lost. But this could have been anyone. It could have been someone she knew, someone who had their whole life ahead of them, someone who did nothing wrong, someone who had likely burned alive. And the fire licked her face. She learned to avoid it. The whole thing was digging up memories she didn't even realize she had. From there, a loose memory of watching a mound of corpses be burned, the fire being so close it would lick her face. The smell of burning flesh and death permeated around her and sinking into the fabric of her clothes. A horrible, horrible sense of déjà vu. God, how she didn't even realize how much she hated the smell of burning flesh. and from what she could see, her teammates were covering the bottom half of their faces with their arms while scavenging the street, trying to find a clue as to what they should do. They very much agreed with her. She saw Reno Rouge stop and stare off in the distance. They were all venturing around, trying to find something that would give any indication of what happened, or of what was happening. But Rena was just standing there, scrutinizing something far off. "Rena, what do you see?" called Ladybug. She raised her hand and pointed at something. Ladybug guessed it was probably 20 feet away, by her hand's positioning, but she couldn't actually see something there. "What is that?" she called back. Everyone watched as King Monkey walked over, careful to avoid debris and loose flames, and pick what Rena Rouge was referring to up. From her hand placement, she could tell it was something circular and large, and from how he had to practically heave it up at first, and the balancing it against his chest, it was a bit heavy. He wasn't flexing his muscles too hard, so it couldn't be too heavy, but he was possibly also using his heightened strength. "What is that?" inquired Vampyrion. Ladybug was a bit grateful that she wasn't the only one completely clueless on the situation. She saw as Queen Bee stepped back, and gulped before looking Rena Rouge in the eye. "I recognize that," Queen Bee stammered. She gulped and covered her mouth with her hands. "From where?" Rena asked, though it didn't really seem like she wanted the answer. She seemed as if she knew what it was, or at least thought she knew what it was, and was scared of confirmation. Queen Bee gulped, and Ladybug saw her heart rate was steadily increasing beyond what it should be. "The news. After the big alien invasion years ago, when a bunch of Justice League members had a press conference. From there, on Wonder Woman. It's an Amazonian shield." Ladybug and everyone else stopped a bit at that, because everyone understood the implication an Amazonian shield had, and everyone could see that the shield was left unaccompanied. "What? So has Wonder Woman or the Amazons been here? Where are they?" Chat Noir asked, looking around at the group for answers. One thing running through Ladybug's head, an echo of what Bunnix had said earlier. Ladybug mumbled it under her breath, but everyone heard her as clear as day. "They failed. All else has failed." Everyone kept close together, while before people would wander out a bit, staying where they could easily yell or be seen by another, but still maybe going a couple 100 feet. Now everyone was within 2 yards of each other. They were constantly looking around and checking the surroundings, and they all had their weapons clutched tightly in their fist, ready at a moment's notice. Ladybug could see Rena Rouge and Carapace tightly holding one another's hand as they walked. They were typically good about keeping PDA in the field non-existent, or at least to a minimum. Ladybug preferred to keep her inner team dynamics and relationships out of the media. Little protection from harassment, and prevented Hawkmoth from utilizing those relationships for his own goals. That didn't stop the rumors from going around. Pictures of Carapace and Rena Rouge together, holding hands on patrol, or being a little too close and handsy during patrols out of the media. Though most of that was reserved for Chat and herself. Ladybug truly had no idea where people got the idea that they were romantically involved. They had both denounced it publicly, followed by Marinette later scrolling through public forums, talking about, "Of course they wouldn't publicly admit it. Hawkmoth would use it against them. If anything, it just proves they're in love." Ichigo Lover 34 on Reddit was just pulling stuff out of their ass with that one. Ladybug really wanted to prevent any of that unwanted attention falling on Carapace and Rena Rouge. So anytime she saw them holding hands or being a bit too close with one another while transformed, Ladybug would discreetly tell them to back away from one another. Right now, she didn't have it in herself to tell them to stop. Didn't have it in herself to rip away the little comfort they were gaining from one another. Because, in all honesty, if her mama and papa were with her right now, God, she didn't want to think about where they might be, what might have happened to them. She would be holding both of their hands and hiding behind them like she did when she was little. Frankly, she was debating telling King Monkey her identity, just so that he would hug her, like he used to do when she would get scared or have nightmares when she stayed over at his house. God, she could use one of those hugs right now. Ladybug was trying to distract herself from the feeling of impending doom that was descending among their team by focusing on their surroundings. She stayed close to Chat Noir. He knew the full details of how her sight worked, and could probably guess she could see next to nothing right now. He pulled her out of the way of moving flames, got her over burning objects, and years of practice was able to do it without anyone realizing. They probably just seemed like they were seeking comfort from one another by standing so closely, and he occasionally taking her hand. Actually, her occasional need for guidance might be one of the things that really sparked their relationship rumors. Him herding her around allowed her to expand her sight further, to places that others would not be able to see. That's when she saw it. No, them. A fully fledged person. She hadn't seen a human other than her team since she got here, the most being half-burnt corpses. She didn't like to think about them. She studied them, trying to figure out anything that she could, though they were quite far away, and it was all a bit fuzzy. She couldn't tell if they were a boy or a girl, but they seemed to be quite buff, which leaned towards male, but in all likelihood could be female. The real thing that she was looking for was whether or not they were alive. They were sitting in a position that she couldn't tell if they were or were not living. But there it was, a shallow heartbeat. She whispered what she saw over to Chat Noir and guided them over to where she saw them, having Chat Noir miraculously spot them on the roof of a half-burnt building, leaning against a broken chimney. They were able to get up there and were met with a male, probably in their mid to late 20s, deadly injured. He was alive, just barely, but alive nonetheless. He had first-degree burns nearly covering his entire body, second-degree burns on his right leg, his left forearm. God help him, she didn't even think that was a third-degree burn. She had very basic medical knowledge, basically no experience, and everything she knew was from probably outdated medical textbooks that she had found on one of those copyright textbook sites online. But that was down to the bone. What, fourth? Fifth degree? No doubt the only thing that kept him from bleeding out was the tourniquet she could tell was on his arm. That wasn't even mentioning the heavy smoke inhalation damage that was in his lungs. She could tell he was alive because his heart was beating, but that was a near miracle. They were all standing in a line in front of his form, leaning on a chimney, waiting for him to acknowledge them, but he was completely out of it. Marinette would have thought him sleeping if she couldn't see he clearly wasn't. Viperion took the initiative and stepped forward, trying to rouse him. He was the best on the team with communicating with civilians. Marinette may be able to see every muscle on the body move, breathing patterns, and decipher a person's emotions from that, but often actual communication fell flat with her. She could often come off as threatening and frighten trauma victims without even realizing it. Vampirion, both as a superhero and as Luca, had always been good when it came to soothing hysterical civilians and helping them when it came to non-threatening communication. Hey, can you talk to me? He asked. He wasn't getting a response, so he attempted to slowly put his hand on the man's shoulder. He jolted up, making everyone jump back, and took what Ladybug could see was maybe like a stick, swung, and hit Vampirion across the face with it. The man swinging around the stick-like thing for a few moments without any real coordination, before he seemed to realize what was going on and drops his stick and openly stares at all of them. His eyes just roam over all of them, openly confused. His breath was harsh and haggard, his good arm clutching his stick-like object on the roof beside him. Something akin to realization washed over him, and Ladybug saw as deep pain crossed his face. Shit. No, I'm hallucinating. Fuck, I'm hallucinating. Shit. The man started clutching his head, curling into himself, while the miraculous team all looked between themselves, silently asking each other what they should do. Hey, it's okay. You're not hallucinating. We're real. I promise we're all real. Viperion spoke to him in a low, soothing voice, stroking his upper arm in an effort to prove it in some way. Sure, some people had both auditory and tactile hallucinations, but the former was far more common, and possibly showing the man that he could physically contact them would serve as proof. The man looked up from his hands and glanced around them. No, I heard all of you on the comms. I saw you. He raised his hand and pointed at Raikou in an accusing fashion. Die. You were right in front of me. I know. God, the smoke is killing me. Fuck. It's gotten to my brain. Shit. The man returned to digging the heel of his hand into his eyes and mumbling incomprehensible words to himself. Meanwhile, everyone was gaping at Ryuko, with some level of horror stricken across their face. Even she seemed put off by what he said. The icy front of Kagami had melted away to show genuine terror. Vampirion never allowed himself to be startled by the man's words, and kept his hand rubbing up and down the upper arm, and keeping focus on him. Well, that's just it. We aren't them. You might not be aware, but we have a time traveler on our team. She works behind the scenes. The public doesn't know about her. Best that way. But she brought us here, to the future, so that we could stop this threat. Vampirion explained as calmly as possible, keeping his voice low, trying to soothe this man into stopping his slight back and forth rocking. Jesus fucking Christ! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! He kept muttering to himself, curling even tighter than before and rocking heavier. Vampirion looked back at them with a pleading look. He clearly didn't think his methods were going to go anywhere. So next up, the team's professional trauma victim aggravator, the heroine who was forbidden from speaking with after-battle Akuma victims. The media, prohibited from making any form of public statement regarding the miraculous team after an incident that dropped the team's public approval rating by 37%. Chloe Burgess, aka Queen Bee. She marched up to him without anyone prompting her. No one would actually tell her to do this. But they really weren't sure what to do in the situation, and everyone was on edge. She grabbed his chin and forced his head up, making sure their eyes were locked. Listen up, dimwit. We aren't hallucinations. We aren't in your head. We are very real. We are very confused. And considering what you said earlier, you have the kind of information we need on the situation, so you're going to stop rocking back and forth like a psychiatric patient who didn't get their meds. And tell us what you know. Yeah, she's not allowed to talk to Akuma victims, or people on patrol, or really anyone while she was transformed, barring the team. The man gulped, looking between all of them, no longer shaking and clearly conscious enough of reality to start comprehending what they were saying in a sane manner. Fucking shit, the man mumbled under his breath. You really are all real. You are all really here. Oh, so he had heard what Vampirion had said earlier. Chloe was glaring down at him again. Congratulations. You realize the obvious. Now, I may repeat. We know nothing, and we are incredibly confused. We were dropped off, told all else has failed, by an overgrown bunny that doesn't understand the concept of always helping others when it doesn't hurt you. You, in your somehow alive state, seem to know what happened. Carapace cut in. What Queen Bee is trying to ask is, could you please help us to understand what has happened? He asked in a much gentler tone than Queen Bee utilized. The man continued to look around at them, quite dazed, before going into a coughing fit. They weren't too far from the fires. While their magic protected them from smoke inhalation, it doesn't protect him, and she could tell that it was getting to him. When he got over his coughing fit, he started to explain the situation to them. It all started when the Justice Leagues got a message from one of our members of an attack on Paris. A big one. This one. What was it? Akuma? I don't know. I can't remember. It called itself Hellfire. You and your little team were fighting it when our reinforcements came in. I believe I was the second one? Maybe third. I'm Arsenal, by the way. Thanks for asking. He ends his sarcastic comment with a small coughing fit before resuming, his voice much raspier than before. Anyways, the first wave of reinforcements we sent was knocked off pretty quickly. Fucking joke, really. We had more of the heavy hitters in the next wave. Magic users, Amazons, fucking aliens. Damn fucking Justice Leaguers had their heads so far up their asses, they decided to take over the goddamn situation and not listen to a word of any of the people who actually knew what they were dealing with. He buried his face on his hands and choked a bit before leaning back against the chimney and staring blankly at the ash-filled sky. Most got killed. Pretty quick, too. Really, it was just fucking sad. Snake Boy over there was the first from your team to go down. Apparently he can see the future, or is from the future, or some shit like that. Well, he ended up getting hit trying to shield one of us. Luke, ever the emotionally concealed one, simply gulped, and running up and down the man's, Arsenal's, good arm. Then I personally saw you. He lazily picked his arm off and gestured in Ryuku's direction. Get blasted right in front of me. Not a pretty sight. The thing may have called itself Hellfire, but apparently it didn't behave as such. According to our magic users, that is. Burning through any and everything uncontrolled. Most of us died trying to save civilians, whether it was directly or trying to evacuate them from the city. Shit. The fires. Jesus fucking Christ. The fires were spreading fast, even if Hellfire hadn't moved out of the city. Last I heard, they reached München, though the ash cloud has nearly covered the entirety of Europe. God, that was when we had comms, though. They went out days ago. I don't know who's left. If there's anybody else out there, we're scattered. He broke into small coughing fits. It was several minutes of Vampirian stroking his arm, and everyone else anxiously watching, before starting to calm down into smaller, quieter coughs. Though Marinette could see it was because his lungs wasn't taking in air anymore. Their rebreathers only worked underwater, not for purifying the air. Giving him one of theirs would do them no good other than disarming them. He went into another coughing fit. Look, I don't know where it is, but we can't stop him. Everyone's down. Those who aren't are split up and can't regroup. This is no man's land. Do yourself a favor. He went into a coughing fit. Everyone was silently communicating with each other over what he was saying, how the Justice League came in, and they failed. They knew what Bunnock said. They knew what the shield was most likely meant, but that wasn't the same as this man, Arsenal, sitting in front of them and confirming their worst nightmare. And get the hell out of here. Arsenal let out a few silent coughs and leaned against the chimney behind him, taking short breaths of smoke-dense air before Vampirian tried shaking him. Wake him up. Pegasus came up to him and laid a hand on his shoulder, silently telling him it won't work. He reached out for his bracelet, ready to reset the timeline by a few minutes. Ladybug grabbed his wrist before he could reach his bracelet. It's a false hope and you know it. The only thing that will happen is you'll be forced to rewatch it. We'll go find the Akuma, defeat it, and reset the timeline until this whole thing never happened. It was false confidence. None of them had ever seen a threat like this before. Sure, Chat Blanc was bad. Really, really bad. But this was worse. In Chat Blanc's timeline, the Justice League hadn't made a huge effort against him. She talked with Bunnock afterwards about what happened. Why hadn't the Justice League defeated him? Sure, they hadn't believed their videotapes they sent, but they had noticed Paris was completely destroyed and everyone was dead. After all, it had lasted a while. Marinette knew that much. Apparently, Earth was pretty much abandoned. The first thing Chat Blanc did was destroy the moon, and that's why the water level was so high. And apparently, it was like that all over the world. Without the moon, everything was thrown off, and the damages by the Black Cat's Miraculous could only be undone by the Ladybug Miraculous, which had been destroyed at the same time the moon was. Some were lucky and made it to the Arks, huge ships that transported several million people to another planet that was habitable by humans. Those that didn't make it, the billions that were left, either died by Chat Blanc or died by the after effects of Chat Blanc. But at the same time, the world flooded. It was a horrible kind of peaceful. It was unsettling, but she preferred it over this, the world burning. A dead man sitting in front of her, who only told her minutes ago that she, along with her team and the entirety of the Justice League, failed and were killed. If the Justice League couldn't do it, what the hell was going to happen to them?